At some point in life, there comes a moment when you realize you've spent too many years trying to hold on to things that no longer depend on you. Other people's expectations, relationships that grew cold, the judgments of those who never understood your effort. All of that weighs on you, and without noticing, it starts to steal your peace. But there's a truth the ancient Stoics understood well. When you stop trying to control what's outside and begin to master your inner world, everything starts to fall into place. Peace doesn't come when others change, but when you choose to focus your energy on the only things that have always been yours: your mind, your attitude, and your choices. Many people feel that with age, the world becomes noisier, more impatient, less attentive to those who have already lived so much. Silence is mistaken for being forgotten, and calmness for resignation. Yet it's precisely at this stage, when your children are walking their own paths and your body asks for a new rhythm, that the possibility of a different kind of rebirth opens up, one that's wiser, lighter, and freer. The 8 lessons from the ancient Stoics we'll explore today aren't just inspiring quotes. They're practical keys to regaining serenity and meaning even amid the chaos of modern life. If this is your first time here, my name is Gabriel, and I share reflections to help those in a mature stage of life live with greater clarity, healthy boundaries, and dignity. I invite you to stay, to listen calmly, and to let each idea find its place within you. Stay until the end, because the final lesson will reveal why, once you truly learn to focus on yourself, everything else finally begins to make sense. Let's begin. When you reach a certain age, you start to notice that much of your energy goes into trying to make the world behave reasonably. We want our children to understand, for others to be fair, for life to recognize our effort. And when that doesn't happen, frustration quietly becomes a habit. The Stoics taught that true freedom begins when we stop fighting what we can't control. Not because we're indifferent, but because we understand that nothing external has power over our peace unless we open the door to it. This idea, simple on the surface, is one of the most revolutionary anyone can embrace in maturity. Earlier in life, we tried to change others, our surroundings, even the past. But now comes a different season, the time to change the direction of our gaze. Epictetus said that things themselves do not disturb us, but rather the opinions we hold about them. And within that phrase lies the seed of immense power. Because when you learn to choose what to focus your attention on, the world no longer pulls you along. You become the one who decides what deserves your energy and what should simply run its course. I remember one day, years ago, a neighbor told me that her daughter had stopped talking to her for months. She spent her afternoons analyzing every word she had said, every gesture, every possible mistake. Her mind was a storm. Until one day, exhausted, she sat in silence and wrote a single sentence: "I can only take care of my part." From then on, she used that phrase as an anchor. It didn't fix the relationship right away, but it restored her peace. And that change was enough for life to start moving again. When we've spent so long living focused on the external, turning our attention inward can feel like a void. But that void isn't emptiness, it's space. Space to breathe, to observe without reacting, to decide calmly. That space is where freedom begins. You don't need to isolate yourself or cut ties. It's enough to stop feeding what drains you and nourish what gives you meaning. You might wonder how to do that in practice. There's no exact formula, but there is a habit. Every time something unsettles you, pause for a moment and ask yourself whether it depends on you. If the answer is no, let it go, consciously. At first it's hard, but with time it becomes a natural way of living. And each time you do it, your mind grows a little stronger, like a muscle learning to hold its calm. Life after 50 moves at a different pace, slower, wiser, and that's not a disadvantage. It's an opportunity to see more clearly. The noise may not disappear, but it no longer pulls you under. You learn to move within it with dignity, with serenity, with a gaze that observes without judgment. And there, in that attention you choose to direct toward what truly matters, peace begins to rebuild itself. With that in mind, we open the door to a lesson that may sting, but ultimately sets us free, learning to let go of the need for others' recognition and rediscovering the strength of living from authenticity. There's a subtle trap that appears with maturity, believing that love or external validation is the measure of our worth. After so many years of caring, supporting, giving, and accompanying others, it can hurt to see that some barely notice or show gratitude. But Stoic wisdom teaches that the need for recognition is a refined form of slavery. When our well-being depends on others' approval, we hand over the keys to our peace. And over time, those keys become harder to retrieve. We've already learned that mastering our attention gives us inner power. Now, that power is tested when others don't see, thank, or approve of us. Seneca said that whoever lives for public opinion has ceased to be free. It sounds harsh, but it's true. How many times have you felt guilty for doing something just for yourself? How many times have you postponed a desire because you were afraid of disappointing someone? When you seek approval, you fragment yourself. When you act from your essence, you become whole again. I remember a woman I met at a workshop. She had spent her whole life caring for her family. Her children were grown, and though they loved her, they rarely called. She told me, "I feel like I'm no longer useful." I asked her what she did purely for pleasure, expecting nothing in return. She went quiet. Finally, she smiled and said, "I love painting, but I haven't touched a brush in years because no one asks me to." That afternoon, she decided to start again, not for applause, but as a way to remember herself. Months later, she wrote to me, "I discovered that peace wasn't in being seen. It was in seeing myself again." Letting go of the need for recognition doesn't mean indifference. It's not about becoming cold or rejecting love. It's about loving without begging, giving without keeping score, and letting others' appreciation be a gift, not a debt. When you no longer depend on applause, your actions become purer. You work, care, help, or stay silent because you choose to, not because you expect a reward. And that inner freedom shines, even if no one notices. The Stoics compared virtue to a tree. It doesn't ask to be admired, it simply grows and offers shade. So it is with a wise life. It blooms quietly, steady and calm, without anxiety over being seen. When you reach that serenity, loneliness stops hurting so much because it no longer means lack of love. It becomes space to love yourself without witnesses. Practice one small act each day just for you. It could be reading for a while, tending to a plant, cooking something special, or writing with no one knowing. That act, done without an audience, is a form of freedom. Little by little, you'll notice that calm doesn't come from outside. It comes from the respect with which you treat yourself. Letting go of the need for recognition is a process, not an instant decision. But every step toward emotional independence brings you closer to the fulfillment the Stoics so deeply valued. And from that inner calm arises the true power of a conscious mind, to choose thoughts that nurture serenity and discard those that poison the soul. When life grows quieter, the mind tends to grow louder. And that noise can become an invisible enemy if we don't learn to observe it carefully. The Stoics believed that everything begins in thought. A poorly managed idea can ruin an entire day, while a clear perspective can turn loss into serenity. Choosing thoughts wisely doesn't mean denying what we feel. It means steering our thinking toward what builds, not what destroys. In the previous points, we learned that control doesn't lie outside, but in the mind, that interprets what happens. But what happens when the mind becomes a machine of assumptions? Often, we silently repeat phrases that chip away at our peace. I'm no longer important. It's too late to change. No one understands me. These ideas seem harmless, but when repeated, they turn into truths. The Stoics offered a simple practice. Observe your thoughts as if they were clouds. You are not the cloud, you are the sky that holds it. Years ago, I went through a period when my mind wouldn't stop replaying mistakes. Every night I would revisit past conversations, blaming myself for what I'd said or hadn't said. Then one day, I read a line from Marcus Aurelius. Your mind will take the shape of what you most often think. It struck me deeply, so I began keeping a small notebook. Each time I noticed a recurring thought, I wrote it down, and beside it added a calmer alternative. It wasn't magic, but over time I noticed my inner tone begin to shift. The worries didn't disappear, but they no longer ruled me. Choosing your thoughts carries responsibility. If you focus your attention on what's missing, your spirit wilts. If you choose to focus on what you can still appreciate or nurture, your mind grows stronger. Seneca said, "No wind is favorable to the one who doesn't know to which port he sails." And that port, at this stage in life, might be something as simple as the quiet peace of being at ease with yourself, with no explanations owed to anyone. Sometimes we believe our thoughts are imposed on us, but they're really like guests. You decide who to let in and how long they stay. If you woke up today feeling worried, observe it, name it, then shift your focus. It might be through an action, a deep breath, or a small act of kindness. What you think determines how you live this moment, and the moment is the only thing that's truly real. When you master your thoughts, your energy is freed from guilt and fear. You begin to feel that life, with all it holds, is not your enemy. Mental silence is not emptiness, it's fullness without noise. And it's there, in that quiet space, where the mature soul finds rest. Allow me to invite you. If this content is helping you see things more clearly, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share your name and country in the comments. I read every message, and it moves me to see this community growing in so many different places. Tell me also what thought you would consciously choose to strengthen your inner peace. Your answer might help someone else. With that said, let's return to the central theme. If our thoughts shape our lives, the next natural step is to learn to let go of what no longer serves us, without dragging resentment or guilt, making space for the new things ready to enter. Letting go doesn't always mean ending something, sometimes it means transforming. We discover this over time, as life shows us that not everything we love is meant to stay. Yet the human heart clings, even when it knows something has already ended. The Stoics spoke of accepting the ever-changing nature of things, not as resignation, but as wisdom. What changes doesn't betray us, it simply follows its course. Learning to let go without resentment means understanding that nothing that left was ever truly under our control, and that the deepest kind of love is the one that allows the other to continue their path without bitterness. With that in mind, we can look inward and recognize that there's no loss without attachment. Sometimes what hurts most isn't the absence of the other, but the role they played in our identity. When a child grows distant, when a relationship cools, when life changes its rhythm, it feels as if a part of us has been taken away. But that isn't loss, it's transformation. Epictetus said that the key to serenity is to love what life gives and let go of what life takes away. That phrase, simple yet profound, can free us from years of stored anger. I remember a story a 70-year-old woman once told me. She had spent a decade without speaking to her sister over a conflict she no longer even remembered how it began. One day she decided to write her a letter without expecting a reply, not to reconcile, but to release the weight. In the letter, she didn't justify anything. She simply wished her peace. Her sister never responded, but she told me, "I slept peacefully for the first time in 10 years. That is what letting go means. Freeing yourself from what can't be changed and resting in what still depends on you, your own attitude. Letting go doesn't erase the story, it dignifies it. It's an act of emotional maturity that cleanses the soul. It means realizing that you no longer need to win or be right to feel at peace. It means looking back without blame and looking forward without fear. True strength doesn't lie in holding on, but in allowing what's been lived to become wisdom. And what about when we can't forgive? Sometimes forgiveness doesn't come because we're still waiting for an apology. But forgiveness, in the Stoic sense, doesn't require witnesses. It's not about reconciling with the one who hurt you, but about freeing yourself from the poison their memory left behind. If you can't fully forgive, start by no longer feeding the thought of the pain. That first step is already a form of freedom. When you learn to let go, you realize you're not losing. You're making space. Space for new friendships, new passions, new ways of loving. You can't receive if your hands remain closed. And in that gesture of opening yourself to change lies something deeply spiritual, the trust that what leaves makes room for what is meant to arrive. Behind all of this is a quiet invitation to stop fighting against the flow of life. Marcus Aurelius captured it perfectly. Accept whatever comes to you, woven into the pattern of your destiny. When you accept, you stop resisting, and paradoxically, you regain strength. Letting go with love doesn't weaken you. It makes you wiser, calmer, and lighter. And it's precisely from that inner lightness that the ability to build a coherent life is born. A life lived according to your own values, not those of others. After letting go of what no belongs anymore, an inevitable question arises. Where do we live from now? In maturity, when the roles that once defined us begin to change, we're given the chance to rewrite the rules. Living according to your own values means no longer acting out of obligation, but out of conviction. The Stoics understood that virtue wasn't a moralistic concept, but a compass, a way of walking in alignment with one's inner truth. When the external loses its shine, personal worth is measured by the coherence between what you think, feel, and do. We've already seen that letting go creates space. Now that space needs direction. It's not enough to empty yourself of what hurts. You must fill yourself with what gives meaning. Seneca said that a good life doesn't depend on its length, but on its quality, and that quality is defined by coherence. What truly matters to you today? What decisions could you make if you stopped seeking approval and followed only your deepest principles? Each answer to those questions is a seed of serenity. I once met a man who had worked more than 40 years at the same company. When he retired, he fell into a quiet sadness. He felt he had lost his purpose. One day, during a conversation, I asked him what value had guided his life. He answered without hesitation, honesty. Then I said, "Your job has changed, but your value hasn't. You can still live each day with the same integrity, even if no one pays you for it." That line made him smile. He understood that values don't retire, they simply take on new forms. Living according to your values also means accepting that some relationships will fade. When you choose coherence, not everyone stays, but those who do stay out of genuine love. You no longer need to defend your peace loudly because your actions protect it quietly. Coherence doesn't always bring company, but it always brings self-respect, and that in maturity is worth more than any applause. The Stoics believed that the wise live in harmony with nature, and that includes one's own nature. Forcing yourself to fit where you no longer belong is a form of self-betrayal. When you accept who you are and what you no longer wish to repeat, you begin to live with a simplicity that silences the noise of the world. It's not about withdrawing from life, but about inhabiting it with meaning. Each time you choose to act from your values, you build an invisible strength. It doesn't matter if no one notices, the serenity you feel is proof enough. On the other hand, every time you betray your principles to please others, you lose a piece of your dignity. That's why living with coherence isn't a spiritual luxury. It's an act of emotional survival. Mature life holds a special power. It no longer needs to prove. It simply needs to be. And to be means accepting that your values are your true home. When everything else changes, they remain. From that steady root grows a new kind of wisdom, the ability to turn daily life into a training ground for the soul, where every small gesture can become a conscious practice. Some believe wisdom is found in great journeys or difficult books, but the Stoics knew it reveals itself in the everyday. Not in moments of glory, but in the small acts we repeat each day. Routine, seen through serenity, can become a silent school where we learn to care for the body, mind, and soul without grand speeches. Turning routine into wisdom means understanding that life doesn't change in extraordinary moments, but in the way we live the ordinary ones. We've already seen that living according to your values is the foundation of coherence. Now the challenge is to practice that coherence in the smallest things. How do I prepare my breakfast? How do I speak to myself when I make a mistake? With what presence do I do the tasks no one notices? The Stoics often said that excellence is not an act, but a habit. Maturity, far from being the end of the road, is the moment when we can finally make every gesture a reflection of the wisdom we've been gathering for decades. I remember a woman who told me that her greatest spiritual change happened when she started making her bed calmly. Nothing mystical, nothing spectacular. She simply decided that each morning that act would be her way of saying thank you. Over time, she told me she stopped feeling so scattered. She realized that caring for small details was a way of caring for her mind. The ordinary had become prayer, presence, and balance. Habits are a form of self-love, eating mindfully, walking without rushing, tending to your breath, keeping your home in order, writing for a few minutes. These are small rituals that, done with awareness, bring you back to the present. And the present, as Marcus Aurelius said, is the only thing no one can steal from you. If you can inhabit your day with attention, you're already practicing wisdom without even realizing it. Sometimes the problem isn't the routine, but how we live it. Repetition without presence becomes boredom. Conscious repetition becomes mastery. Zen monks and Stoics agreed on this. Wiping a table or washing dishes can be as sacred as meditating if it's done with soul. There are no small tasks when your attention is complete. In maturity, when life's outer rhythm slows down, we gain the privilege of noticing what once passed unnoticed, the sound of water, the taste of fruit, the silence after a conversation. Every moment can be an opportunity to strengthen the mind and soften the heart. Routine stops being a burden and becomes a refuge. Transforming the everyday into wisdom is a quiet form of resistance against the chaos of the world. You don't need a spiritual retreat, only a new way of seeing what you already do. In that conscious way of looking lies the true practice of Stoicism, acting with intention, living with presence, and giving thanks without conditions. And when you reach that inner calm, trained day by day, you discover a new power, the ability to remain serene even when everything around you seems to move. Because calm, as we'll see next, isn't something you seek outside, it's something you cultivate within. There are days when everything seems to fall apart at once. Plans change, people react, emotions rise and fall without warning. Maturity doesn't spare us from chaos, it simply teaches us to navigate it with more dignity. The Stoics understood that chaos wasn't an enemy, but a test of inner strength. Cultivating calm in the midst of noise isn't about pretending to be serene. It's about learning to respond without losing your center. Life won't always be peaceful, but you can learn to be. Building on the previous lesson, the value of mindful routine, we can take a deeper step. Temperance. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his journal, "The soul becomes stronger when it does not react to every jolt of fate." Chaos reveals how much our peace depends on what's external. If life changes and we fall apart, it means we built our calm on someone else's foundation. But if we can breathe, observe, and choose with clarity, the storm becomes our teacher. Some time ago, a man told me that during a family argument, he decided to stay silent. Not because he had no arguments, but because he realized everyone else was speaking from emotion. The next day, his son called to apologize. "Dad," he said, "I don't understand how you managed to stay so calm." He replied, "Because I didn't want to win the fight, I wanted to win the peace." That simple gesture was a living lesson in Stoic philosophy. Serenity is not weakness, it's power under control. Calm must be cultivated like a garden. It doesn't appear overnight, it grows through daily practice. It begins with the breath, with learning to pause before responding, with remembering that most things aren't worth our anger. Calm, then, becomes a form of spiritual elegance. It's not about suppressing what hurts, but about choosing the right moment and way to express it without harming ourselves or others. Sometimes family, the news, or our surroundings seem to conspire to steal our peace. But no one can take from us what we consciously choose to protect. If your calm depends on others' silence, it will always be fragile. If it depends on your discernment, no one can touch it. And that discernment strengthens each time you choose not to react impulsively, but to respond wisely. Think about how many times you've regretted words spoken in anger, and how many times you've been grateful for waiting until the emotion cooled. That is the practice, not running from conflict, but not fueling it either. Temperance doesn't erase emotions, it organizes them. It gives them their place without letting them rule. Maturity offers us a gift we didn't have before, inner time. We no longer need to rush to prove anything. We can pause, observe, and decide. When you live from that state, even chaotic days feel lighter. The world may not calm down, but you do. And from that inner serenity arises the deepest understanding of Stoicism, accepting age not as a burden, but as a teacher. Accepting the passage of time isn't surrender, it's understanding that each passing year brings a kind of clarity that was once invisible. Society often glorifies youth, but the Stoics saw maturity as the place where wisdom finally blossoms. When you embrace your age as a teacher, you realize you no longer need to prove anything, only to understand. Life stops being a race and becomes a deep conversation with yourself. From the calm we've learned to cultivate, we can now look back with gratitude and forward with serenity. Our bodies change, our strength shifts, but our clarity deepens. Seneca said, "The greatest blessing of old age is not having excessive desires." That doesn't mean a lack of passion, it means freedom. The mature soul no longer moves out of urgency, but out of conviction. It knows that each new day is a gift, meant to be lived with presence. Not long ago, I heard a 68-year-old man say, "I finally understand that I don't have to be who I was before." That phrase struck me as the perfect summary of Stoicism applied to life. It's not about reclaiming what once was, but about making the most of what is now possible. There's a serene beauty in accepting the marks of time as maps of what's been lived, in celebrating the calm that replaces haste, and in being grateful for the silence that once frightened you, but now keeps you company. Age doesn't only teach about loss, it teaches about proportion. It shows us which battles are worth fighting and which only drain us. It teaches that happiness isn't found in accumulation, but in understanding. That dignity doesn't come from strength, but from balance. That true freedom begins when we stop fearing the inevitable, and that aging consciously is perhaps the most revolutionary act in a world terrified of growing old. Embracing age as a teacher also means forgiving yourself. Not for the mistakes of the past, but for not having known before what you understand now. Every wrinkle, every scar, every silence held inside carries a lesson. Looking at them with tenderness is a way of reconciling with your entire story. There's no mistake that hasn't taught you something, no loss that hasn't brought wisdom. The Stoics taught that nature makes no errors, and you are part of it. If life has brought you this far, it's because there's still something to learn, something to give, something to illuminate in others. You don't need to change the whole world. It's enough to live with peace and dignity so that your world changes with you. Serenity is contagious. And in that final serenity, we come to understand that focusing on yourself isn't selfish, it's respect. Because when you know yourself, you find calm. And when you find calm, everything around you slowly begins to fall into place. That is the fulfilled promise of Stoic wisdom, that by turning your gaze inward, you discover that the world too begins to find its order. We've explored 8 lessons that, though born centuries ago, remain medicine for the modern soul. We learned that true control begins with attention, that letting go of recognition brings freedom, that our thoughts can be chosen, and that forgiving without resentment doesn't weaken us. It purifies us. We also discovered that living according to our own values is the foundation of coherence, that routine can become a teacher when lived with presence, that calm is a daily practice, and that age, far from being a loss, is an endless source of wisdom. If this reflection leaves anything behind, it's the certainty that when we focus on ourselves with honesty and love, everything begins to align with greater clarity and meaning. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this journey. Your time and attention are a gift. This space exists because people like you choose to pause, reflect, cultivate serenity, and see life with kinder eyes. Every comment, every word of gratitude, every shared story reminds us that we are not alone on this path of discovery. We are a community learning to protect peace and dignity, even when the world seems to move in another direction. My name is Gabriel, and my purpose is to share tools that help you live with emotional clarity, healthy boundaries, and practical serenity that doesn't depend on others. Stoic philosophy, combined with the experience of mature life, offers a realistic map for safeguarding inner peace without withdrawing from the world. That's the heart of everything we do here, reclaiming the power over what truly depends on us. I invite you to share in the comments where you're watching from and to write this phrase to seal what you've learned today. I focus on myself and let life fall into place. That sentence captures the spirit of this video, the reminder that calm isn't found outside, it's cultivated within. And if you think someone you care about needs to hear this message, share it with love. You never know how much light it might bring to their day. Thank you for being here, for your attention, and for your conscious presence. Up next, you'll see 2 videos on the screen. Choose one and keep diving deeper into this journey of wisdom and inner freedom. I'll see you in the next session with the same purpose as always, to keep learning how to live with peace, dignity, and a gentler outlook on life.